Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Bytes. I'm your host, Max Bone, and for this episode, I welcome back horror writer John Ward for his new book, A Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul, now out through Crystal Lake Publishing. I was very excited to do this because reading this book, it is a true horror story, largely based on John's real life. We talk all about the inspiration behind the story, the character, and his journey as he faces a dark, malevolent entity, the sick, absolutely sick cover art, and we get a sneak peek at what's next. All right, John. So first off, welcome back to the show. It is really good to have you here again. We had you here last on for Scareville 8, Food to Die For, all about killer clowns. And now we're on to something a little different. This is more like a psychological haunting kind of story. Your new book, A Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul, released about 2 weeks ago as of the date of this recording. So congratulations on the publication. What could you just take us through a quick walk through what this book is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me back on. I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, so A Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul is a grief horror and possession horror story just kind of meshed together into this one big emotion-filled, fright-filled horror novel. And it is loosely inspired by real events that I went through, both in my actual personal life and as well as my paranormal journey as a paranormal investigator. I combined a lot of the elements that I experienced and went through and kind of used a thought process of if X had happened instead of Y, what would that have looked like? And used that to really create the framework for this story. But it is following my main character. His name in part one is Johnny Tinsley. He's 8 years old. And then in part two, it's him as an adult, 25 years later, going by John Tinsley. But he is the main focal point of the story throughout. But I do adjust characters because I do multi-person, first-person point of view throughout the story. So there's several other characters as well, but he is the main focal point of the entire story. And it is, like I said, loosely based off things that I went through. So it's going to run people through the emotional roller coaster, the gambit, everything from laughter to anger to fear to sadness. And I think I can safely say now after seeing, some reviews coming in that it's resonating with people. So
I'll
that's
bet.
exciting to see.
Yeah. Can we talk a bit about just how your personal life and your paranormal investigations kind of factor into the story process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I've been a paranormal investigator now for, I don't know, 10 to 12 years. I've investigated locations all across Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Vermont, New York. So I've been all around and I've at this point as a paranormal investigator, I know in my heart of hearts it's real. There's no scientific way to prove it. I just know the experiences I've had that science can't explain away. So now as a paranormal investigator, I just go out there and collect personal experiences. Like this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to me. And anyways, different investigations I've done over the years, I pulled pieces from or nightmares I've had from spirits coming into my head when I'm sleeping, are different things that I actually did incorporate into this story. And then real life events, things that I went through with my ex-wife and things like that have also made it into the story. And then a lot of like real life inspirations, like the kid being a fan of Cleveland Indians baseball, which would have been the Indians still in 1998. And stuff like that was all inspired by real things. So even my hometown I grew up in was the basis for the first part of the story. So
Okay, wow. I'm really curious about your paranormal investigation. So you mentioned you've been doing this for about a decade. What kinds of things have you seen, and how do you know when something's legit and when it's just something that someone heard one night?
yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. Obviously, there's no, like I said, no scientific proof of ghosts. We could go down a rabbit hole where people believe it's interdimensional beings that we're interacting with, but there is something out there. It's just much easier to say it's ghosts. However, my counter argument to that as well is I have dealt with darker energies, and I've seen and experienced a lot of different things And much of the scope of this story was created by because you can see I've got a whole room of creepy antiques. I can't spin it around too much, but um, it's become commonplace for a lot of paranormal investigators in this modern age to want to collect haunted objects or just creepy objects and things like that. And I was one of those people, and I thought I could handle it. And I brought in, I didn't even, they weren't claimed to be haunted, by the way. I bought this set of three clown dolls from this seller online. They never claimed them to be haunted or anything like that, but something was drawing me to them. And so I bought them, and my original intention was I was going to donate these dolls to a paranormal convention for a raffle, give away all this stuff. But for some reason in my head, I was like, no, I'm keeping these. I want these, and blah, 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 blah. And I say all that to say this, when you're dealing with a darker energy, which those dolls absolutely had, it's almost like this indescribable magnetic pull that you can't explain. You're making bad choices, your life starts to crumble. You're dealing with chaos on a day-to-day basis, and you don't see or recognize where that is coming from. And that's a very scary, helpless feeling. And it was at a point where me and my ex-wife, we were going through a lot of really bad, really rough stuff. And I remember I was at my parents' house one day, and my mom said something along the lines of, well, it's all that, all that creepy shit you have in your house. Like, you need to get rid of it. And I was like, well, no, I've had this stuff for years. And then I thought about the trio of clown dolls that I brought home, a few months prior. And it was like the veil got lifted off my eyes. And I was like, holy shit. And immediately I went home and I grabbed the dolls. I stuffed them into this old box with a Bible in it, and I posted a photo, which is actually in the back of the book at A Blackened Heart, a Blackened Soul. That photo is in the back of the book. It was the same photo I posted on Facebook to just be like, hey, here's what's going on with these dolls. I want them out of my life. Someone in the paranormal field, you come take them, and they're yours. And that was me being stupid and irresponsible. I shouldn't have done that, but my good friend Eddie Pence, who lives about an hour away from me, he stepped up and was like, I'll take him. And again, paranormal investigators, we always think we can handle it and all this stuff. Anyways, he takes him, his life starts to crumble and chaos ensues. And then he winds up donating them to our friend Steve, who ran a haunted museum in West Virginia. He kept those dolls in what he called the dark room, which was for all the bad energy stuff. And anyways, long story short, his museum is no longer open. I mean, I could speculate to this day that it might be caused by those dolls. He's had some very serious health complications come up. Um, it it's just one of those things. But as far as things I've seen in the paranormal, I've seen everything. I've seen it all. Stuff that people would be like, "Oh, you're full of shit." There's no way to prove it. I've experienced it. You can take my word for it or you can't. I've seen full body apparitions. I've seen shadows. I've just everything. I've seen it all. It's very, very real. There's something out there.
Mhm.
And that's, I guess, the best way I could answer that.
All right, all right. Okay, so let us pivot back to the new book. You have John Tinsley, who loses his mother in a car accident, and that's kind of just the beginning for him. From like the years afterwards, he's haunted by this dark entity. He has visions. He's hunted by shadows. I want to talk about the years in between when he loses his mom and where we are now when we see him again in the book. What's his life like? Like how does he kind of handle things?
Yeah, so in my mind, I could have done a little more of fill in between him as an 8-year-old to him as an adult and as a 33-year-old. But for me, I wanted that because obviously he got separated from the doll. The doll's name in the story is Lucy. It's what's based on those trio of clown dolls that I was just discussing. He gets separated after, I don't want to give too much away, but he gets separated from the doll, which the evil entity is attached to at that point. And it reconnects with him later in life. But as far as life in between, I tried to come back and touch on it lightly because it didn't really impact much of the actual plot of the story. But in my head, obviously he had a little bit of a rough upbringing, battling, jumping through different adoptive families or foster homes or whatever you want to call them. And then he, you know, battled some mental health stuff, started working in manufacturing, which is also accurate to me. I worked in manufacturing for a long time and before I bounced into doing sales and stuff now. But um yeah, it was the kind of the turning point for John was when he was at a metal bar, also accurate to me, in Akron, Ohio, where he met his future wife, who was not at all a metalhead, like just seemed out of place at a metalhead bar. She was gorgeous, and he's sitting at the bar, just kind of wallowing and drinking, and noticed her across the room because she sticks out like a sore thumb. She's not the type of person to be at that kind of a bar. Anyways, she invites him over to play pool, and the two hit it off, fall in love immediately. And that was kind of like his turning point. Like things are getting better. It gives him hope for life. And she gave him strength and all these different things. And they wind up building a beautiful life together. And through that in the story, it gives readers hopes that things are going to finally turn around for John and become better. And then he's become a paranormal investigator at this point. I think his childhood had influenced him into wanting to find out more answers about what he had experienced as a child. And so he and his, it would have been his girlfriend or his wife at that time, filmed a documentary with their friend Eddie, who you just heard me mention. He's based off a real character too. They filmed a documentary together. It explodes. They get viral. They make money, and that's their full-time career. But when they go to film their second documentary in the story, he gets reconnected with Lucy and that evil entity, and things go downhill from there.
Yeah, I would expect they do. So I know from just from like reading the synopsis that John at some point has to confront Lucy. He has to confront this entity that's been haunting him all these years. But what's like the turnout for him? Like what happens to make him think, yeah, I have to actually do something about this?
Honestly, it was this is a hard one to answer because I'm trying not to give away too much in the story.
Exactly. No spoilers, folks.
But he was still sort of in denial even when he was reunited with Lucy. Like he psychologically in his mind, he didn't think it was anything malevolent still. I don't believe based on the way the characterization was written. But then things start going awry in his life really, really quickly once he brings that doll home. And it gets to a point where he can't keep up with it and he knows he has to do something. He has a friend named Sean, also based on a real life character. And Sean came to the house, tried to cleanse the house and all this stuff, which is also true. I had my friend Sean come and cleanse my house, and the events during that cleansing are in the story. But he tried to combat it, but it was too little, too late, and more or less, house cleansing. If you're dealing with something demonic, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I think for me, when I was writing that story, John and even his wife Megan viewed it as just a dark entity, not something necessarily demonic, which a cleansing would work for something like that. So that's how they tried to combat it. But by the time it was too little, too late, I guess is what I would say.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about how your own life influences story. Your friends are in the story. People that you know are in the story. How much of this would you say is fiction, and how much of this is just real life, what you've experienced?
I would say a lot of it, particularly in part two with the adulthood stuff, is
Hmm.
based on real things I went through. Obviously, there's parts that I have to embellish to add a little more like scare on steroids,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, the phantom footsteps, the dreams and influencing your brain and your head and your life crumbling, all that stuff is very, very real. The sense of loss is real. There's a very emotional bar scene, which I won't give too much away, but that is 100% real, authentic, something that I went through with my mental health, that I felt had to be incorporated in the story. Um, but yeah, as far as like the demonic, what's the word I'm trying to figure out here? The way it comes into the life, like visibility of it, I guess, physical seeing, that stuff is probably largely fictionalized. But yeah, that a lot of it is very, very real in part two.
Wow. Do you have a scene that really stands out to you? Whether it's like just the connection to your own life, or is it maybe like a favorite like scare scene?
Oh, there's a lot. I take
Yeah.
a lot of so there's one scene in part one. Uh, it's not necessarily scary. It's very tense. It's a very dread-inducing scene with Johnny's grandma. And I'm trying not to, I'll just call it the rabbit scene. And I purposely wrote it in a way that's going to really make readers uncomfortable and tense. And that one I'm very, very proud of. I've had a few people say that that scene grossed them out. And then in part two, like I said, part two is just so filled with emotion. There is a scene, and I'm not going to say what exactly happens because it is a major, major part of the story. Um, but it's after the bar scene, and the way my thought process was when I made that scene, like I said, it was that framework of if X had happened instead of Y, what would that have looked like? So, um, the bar scene, like I said, is very, very emotional, and it has to do with something keeping me from offing myself, right? Like that's where I was at mentally at that time. And in my opinion, if that demon was still in my life at that time and it was frustrated that I didn't, you know, take my life, what would it have done to make that happen? And it did. And that's a very emotional part of the story is what I will say.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Okay. How was it for you to kind of, I guess I would say, like relive these different parts of your life as you're kind of writing the story? Because so much of it is really based on what you've been through.
yeah, it was very emotional, but also cathartic. Like it felt, even though it's scary to be vulnerable like that and put that into a story, it was also um I don't know, some sort of therapy, I guess, to be able to put that on paper and allow people to experience that. And one of the things that I didn't really expect when I wrote and published this story was how it would resonate with readers. I've had a lot of readers that have struggled with mental health actually reach out to me and say my book was very relatable to them. And I had one reader reach out to me. She said that she had been battling some very tough mental health while she was reading my story. And it's a very bleak story, mind you. So I didn't expect this, but she said my book saved her life because it opened her eyes to how that could impact others. And so that was very moving for me to experience and have someone tell me that. So yeah.
Did you expect that your own battles would kind of help like others going through the same thing?
I had no idea. I figured people were gonna, either love me or hate me based on how emotional and bleak this story was. Because some people really like the bleak grief horror and stuff, and then other people they get frustrated because characters die and all this stuff. You know what I mean? But as far as people connecting that to their own lives and circling it back to their own life and finding comfort in knowing that it's not maybe not as bad as what they thought and changes the framework of their mind. Like I did not expect that, and it's very powerful. And I'm honored that people feel that way. Some people feel that way. I can't say everybody, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really good. I think it's like really good when your books can have this really like unexpected benefit for like people out there. So that's yeah, good for you, man.
thank you.
Let's talk about cover art because I've seen the cover of this book and oh my God, it is amazing. Who did this?
Yeah, so there is a cover illustrator. His name is Greg Chapman. He's got a website called Dark Designs. And honestly, I was just doing basically the equivalent of window shopping. I was looking for pre-made cover designs when I first had the idea for this book. And Greg had something very, very similar to what it wound up being on his site. And I'm like, man, that looks perfect for the scope of this story. And I went to him with some ideas. I was like, hey, if you could change this and this, could we make that work? And I'll buy the cover. And he did. He was great to work with. He made those couple little changes, and I think it fits the story so well. Even on the back with the goat head on the back cover of it, he did that. I think it was a custom drawing he did for it, and it turned out great. Really, really excited about just. It doesn't look as great in pictures. If you see this thing in person, it's just so pristine. Really, really cool cover. I'm very proud of it, and Greg did a great job.
All right. All right, John. Well, we are coming down to the end of this discussion, but a few more questions. I imagine that there are some viewers and listeners who say, you know what, I have an idea, but how do you take that idea and just develop it? Like, what's your advice for folks who want to just take this concept they have and make it into a full-fledged story?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think for just about every writer, their process is very, very different. For me, I'm one of those writers that is a plotter, at least to get it going, right? For me, I want to figure out as much as possible beforehand. It may take me a week or two to get a full scope of the story outlined and all my character names, or at least the majority of them, title, Like I can't write without knowing my book title. It will bother me. It will consume my brain until it's figured out. So once I've got as much of it figured out as possible, for me, I can hop right into the story. As long as I know my beginning and some of the main plot points I want to hit in my ending, I can cruise through and write like nobody's business. But there are some people that can just pants their way through stories. I worry about plot holes with that method, so I try to plot as much as possible. Sometimes I veer away from that, sometimes I don't. But for me, and what works for me is I've got a whiteboard or a dry erase board, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I figure out everything from the title. Even if it takes me a day or two or three or four to figure out the title, I have to have that figured out. I figure out the scene setting, where I want the story to mainly take place, and I try to, in my head, because it's basically sitting in there like a movie, I try to come up with all my character names, their personality types, my antagonist, what's my antagonist's goal, why is it doing that, like answering all those questions. That way when I go to outline the story, it should flow pretty naturally. And then from there, like I said, I'm just typing away because it plays in my head like a movie. I'm typing it as I see it. Sometimes the story will veer away from my initial outline, but for the most part, it stays in that same beginning and end point that I wanted to hit. So hopefully
Okay.
that helps.
It does. It does. I'm sure it does. And to wrap things up, of course, the big question: what's next for you?
Yeah, great question. I've got both of my next two Scareville stories done. They're going through edits right now. And then as of I think it was yesterday, I finally came up with the title for my next adult horror novel. So I'm not going to say the title because I did look on Goodreads. It's a title that has not been used by anybody yet. I'm super excited because it has like a double meaning that fits the story perfectly. But I'm going to be doing that as soon as I storyboard everything out. So probably in the next week or two, I'll start writing that, and it's going to be kind of a supernatural in the woods, seclusion, isolation horror story that I'm really excited about.
I love those kinds of stories. It's why I will never go vacationing in a cabin deep in the woods because I know what's going to happen. But John Ward, thank you once again for joining me. I really appreciate this. And for the folks at home who've told you everything, now here's what you do. First off, follow this man on Instagram, John_Ward_horror. If you want to get his books, they're out through our good friends at Crystal Lake Publishing, crystallakepub.com. You'll find everything there. And John, looking forward to the next conversation. I'm sure it'll be very, very terrifying.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I always love talking shop and talking books. So anytime you want to have a discussion, you just let me know and I'll be glad to hop back on.
I love it. All right. And once again, to the listeners and the viewers at home, thank you once again for checking out Citywide Bytes. I'm your host, Max Bowen, and I'll see you all next time.